Sing it now.
Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other. Jesus is the way.
Today we're going to be talking about the skill of confrontation. It's so interesting about that when we confront people that there are actually two whole therapies that are developed just on this. Jay Adams has a complete therapy called Nuthaleo counseling. It's a type of Christian counseling, and it's based completely on the subject of confrontation. What he basically does is he hears what the person's problem is, he compares it to the Bible, he tells the people it doesn't line up with the Bible, and he confronts them on it, and then they work at trying to line up what the person's doing with the Bible. And that's a complete Christian counseling therapy. Then we have in the secular area Gestalt, where they try to help confront the person by bringing out their emotions or what they're really feeling, what's really going on in their life, to help them get more in touch with it. So this is a critical skill. And you'll actually find, when we get to the end of this class, we're going to give you some examples that you're going to run into some very sticky situations in counseling, and you may also run into them in coaching, where you're going to have to know how to confront and how to do this particular skill. You don't use it as much as maybe some of the other skills that we talked about, like attending and asking questions and so on, but in most counseling, someplace you're going to run into the need of dealing with this. So what is confrontation? The definitions in the dictionary is to stand face to face defiantly, to bring together for comparison. Do we like to do that? Now, most people don't like to confront things. In fact, that's one of the problems we see. It's a characteristic of codependency. It's one of the reasons people enable people, because they don't want to have any fights, and they'll lie. I've got a client right now that will lie. It will come up with every excuse because she's so afraid of dealing with the issues in their life. But if you don't deal with the issues, then they're going to pile up and we're going to have all sorts of problems. So what are our goals in the area of confrontation? The first is to come to some agreement or conclusion about whatever is incongruous. That means it's not the same, there's something wrong, this picture doesn't fit together like we want it to fit together, and we need to understand it more so we know what in the world's going on here. We can't have two things happening at the same time. Like we can't have, if a client says to us, I have to leave counseling early today, but I really want to deal with all these issues. Well, which one do they want? Because it's going to take some time to deal with all the issues. We need to resolve the issue. We confront to resolve the issue, not to just have a fight. We want a change in behavior. But here's one of the catches of confrontation. We have another goal, and this is a hard goal to achieve at the same time. We want to stay on the same team. What I mean is this. When you get in a confrontation, many times you're like you're in the opposite team. It's like two lawyers. And we can't hear and we can't listen. Somehow we want to confront in such a way that instead of being opposites, we are on the same team working together to figure this out, rather than causing a big fight and a pain and hurt and all sorts of things and escalation. And we also, from a counseling or coaching point of view, want to be able to confront in a way that we don't lose our client. Do you think that'd be a good idea? In fact, many times if you do this too soon, you could lose your client. So the first part of this is what we might call observation of discrepancies. Because before I can confront, what do I have to do? Know that there's something to confront. I'm going to have to pick up, I'm going to have to, this is my observation skills here again, that I'm going to have to pick up very clearly that there is something that needs to be confronted here. I can't just bury my head in the sand. So what are the things that I'm going to look for? I'm going to give you a whole long list here of things that you can look for instead of like a little checklist you can go down. The first is mixed messages. Like an example, maybe their emotions don't correspond to what they're saying. As an example, they come in and they're saying, you ask them, how are you doing? I'm doing great. And they're crying. Was that a mixed message? Usually you're not doing great and crying at the same time. That's thoughts and feelings, not congruent. But it can be other things too. They can tell you one thing and then they can do exactly the opposite. Discrepancies to look for. Conflict between what people are saying when you have two different people and they're saying different things. How many conflicts do you get in a counseling a marriage usually? Between the man and the woman. He said that. No, I didn't. That is a place to say, well, I'm confused. Now, did you say it or not? Usually the real answer is they're perceiving it differently. Saying one thing, doing another. Verbal that does not match nonverbal. Projection on other things that they are feeling themselves. You get this feeling, you know, they're just saying, you know, people are just not trustworthy. After they just told you a story about how their wife asked them to pick up the groceries and they forgot. Instead of just saying, I blew it, they projected on other people. Distortion of truth. The story just doesn't ring true. This person says they did all these great and wonderful things, but you wonder if they can even read and write. Thoughts and emotions do not line up. When you ask them what they're thinking, they're saying one thing, but they're not expressing the emotions. They're cold as ice. Boundary violations. If they're saying they believe one thing, yes, it's true, they shouldn't hit somebody, but they're hitting somebody. Or they say they agree with this boundary, but they always run over the boundary. They agree, and because they have an alcoholic past, they should not be drinking, but they're still drinking. What does that tell us? Scriptural violations. They say they believe the Bible, and they say they're a good Christian, but they're stripping at the bar. Violations of personal values. They say they really hate being late, but they're late all the time. Impasses, where the client is stuck, many times due to manipulation, guilt, or past unresolved issues. Yes, I want to finish my degree, but I dropped all my classes. I'll do anything to finish my degree, but I want to go to the movies tonight. Avoidance of certain issues. And there are issues that the person has that they just don't want to talk about. I don't want to go there. I know, yes, I've got all this sexual abuse in my life, and I know it has to be resolved, but I'm not going there. Defense mechanisms. We have all these standard defense mechanisms that come pretty much from secular psychology. We see them all over the place. When you see the defense mechanism, then you know there is probably some conflict or there's some reason for the defense, and you might find some discrepancy there or something that needs to be confronted. And sometimes you just have to confront the defense mechanisms. So I'm going to give you a fast list of those. First is denial. Not acknowledging pain, threat, or hurt. Displacement. Shifting the blame that cannot be expressed to another person. That's what we were talking about earlier there a little bit. Identification. Taking on another's characteristics to avoid discomfort. It's very interesting when we have like a kid who just hates his father because his father was very abusive but now acts just like his father. Intellectualization. Emotional distance by abstracting thoughts. Many times you'll see this person is so intellectual. When you see that, it usually means they can't handle emotions. Projection. Transferring motive, feelings, or wishes to others. Reaction formation. Expressing opposite ideas or emotions from those that are really felt. Regression. Reverting to a childlike behavior. I was working with a lady that had borderline personality disorder. And right in the session, she reverted to about a 3-year-old and started beating her husband. Repression. Excluding hurtful thoughts from consciousness. I don't remember that. I had a client just a while back and been involved in a sexual problem and so on, and doesn't remember any of the details of what happened. Sublimation. Redirecting repressed motives and feelings to a more acceptable pursuit. They figure out something that they can do that maybe is good, but the reason they're doing that is because they really have this less problem over here. And because they have this less problem, that's why they want to help kids in the Sunday school. Not a good type of thing, and would obviously have to be confronted. When do you do it? That's also very critical here in the area of confronting. Wait until an adequate relationship is developed. You earn the right to confront. If you confront too soon, what's going to happen? The person is probably going to quit counseling. They're going to think you're against them. They have to understand that you love them, that is, you have your best interest in mind. And that's why you're doing the confronting, or you're going to end up in an argument. You're going to be on opposite sides with the person that you are counseling. If you ever do that, you're in real trouble. And many times you'll get that, though. I remember a particular lady had tremendous obsessions and couldn't get the obsessions out of her mind and so on. And because I kept confronting her, she decided I must be a male chauvinist pig or something, and I was just taking her husband's side. So I had to watch that. I had to back off my confronting, didn't I? Because if she gets the idea that I'm against her, I won't be able to help her anymore. When it fits in, after a relationship is established, you don't usually just walk in saying, I'm going to confront this. You try to fit it in with what's going on in the counseling, and then it sort of flow together. Many times, you wait for a crisis. Because if you confront when there's not a crisis, they might think this is just excessive, I don't really have a problem. So you can wait for the crisis. Another thing that I will do is I'll figure out, okay, I need to confront this client in this particular area. And I'll just turn it over to the Holy Spirit. And say, Lord, you show me, you put it together when we need to deal with this. And I'll have it in the back of my mind, be all prepared to do it, but I'll just let it flow into whatever the situation is. And that usually works the best. And lastly, when you have your ducks in line, don't just jump in and confront something if you haven't thought it through and haven't figured out how you're going to do this, because it might come out different than the way you want it to come out. And of course, don't confront. Use it gingerly on the battlefields that are worth dying for. Don't use it on stuff that really doesn't need to be confronted, especially if you don't have that close relationship. How to do it? Let me use a picture. Many, many years ago, I took lifesaving. Become a lifeguard type of situation. And this is what they told us. You have a person flailing in the water. Do you just swim up to them and try to help them? If you do, what is going to happen? They're going to try to climb on top of you and stand on your head. And they can drown you in the process. So in life-saving, how do you save them? Well, you either dive under them and come up and take them from the back, or you grab one arm and pull them across so you can take them from the back. It's the same thing in counseling, the same thing in coaching. Normally, you don't confront head-on. You figure out some way to go around it, or to change it, or to reframe it in such a way that it will be accepted and be effective. So let's look at the different things that we need to do. The first is be non-judgmental. If you are judging the person and putting them down and saying, "You liar," is that going to work? The better might be, you know, all of us sometimes don't exactly tell the truth, and they have good reasons, rather than don't tell the real reasons. Is there any possibility that that might be going on here now? See the difference? I haven't called him a liar, but I still said I don't really believe what you're saying. Use I and we statements, summarize and give feedback. You know, if I was in that situation, this is how I would feel. But we need to take a look at that. Now, you have really messed up. Now, straighten up now. That kind of stuff just doesn't work that way. Be gentle, warm, and caring. Clearly have the other person's best interest in mind. What is best for them? Never confront it just because you just think they're off the wall or stuff like that. You want to confront and pick out the things to confront that they really need that are going to make a big impact in their life. Use statements like this. On one hand, I hear you saying, but on the other hand, you told me this. Or this is what you did. Another way is, did I hear you correctly? Would you say that again? Or, I'm confused. I like to use that one a lot. I'm confused. It seems like you're telling me this, and you're telling me this, and you're telling me that, but I've heard that and that and that also. Explain that to me, please. Confronting boundary violations. Did you? I thought we agreed on that, didn't we? Use stories in major confrontations. Remember the story in the Bible of David, where David slept with Bathsheba and then killed Uriah, her husband? How did Nathan the prophet confront David? He went to David and said, David, little problem here in the kingdom that I've heard about. There was this guy and he had many, many sheep, and he had a neighbor that only had one sheep. And and somebody came to eat at his place, and he took the neighbor's sheep and sacrificed it for the meal instead of taking any of his own sheep. And that sheep was very dear to his neighbor because they had brought it up in the house and so on and so forth. David, what do you think? And David said, that man should die. And what did Nathan say? You are the man. You took another man's wife, and you could have had any woman you wanted, and I would have given you 10 more wives if you wanted them. And David, of course, the confrontation worked, and David said, you're right. Not sure too many other people might have taken it that way, but it says what's in your heart. Use in the here and now as you see it. The best time to confront is when it's going on right now, unless it's a major, major thing. And of course, you might see it several times, and then you decide. But if you can do it right now, you might already have it in mind, and then when they do it the next time, then you're prepared and you confront it. Confront in love and hope for the future. In counseling, we have what's called an intervention, many times in the area of drugs and alcohol. And what they'll do is they'll get all the people together that love this person and have a meeting, and they all confront them on the fact that they're clearly an alcoholic and they're destroying their lives and they're destroying their family and so on and so forth. But interventions can go wrong because the people get in there and they just say all the things about they think this person's an absolute loser and no good and rotten and they need to just straighten out. But instead, the way interventions work the best is you go in and say, you know what, we love you very much and we think you have a great and wonderful future, and we're just afraid that you're destroying your future. And we're all here on your side, and we're all here to support you. Those are the kind of interventions and the kind of confrontation that really works here. Use natural consequences. In other words, I'm just really concerned. Do you know, if you can continue to violate your restraining order, I think you're not going to complete this program because I think you're going to get thrown in prison. You just keep doing that over and over again. What do you think? Use perceptions of what they said rather than facts, unless the facts are well established. One of the things that get in conflict all the time is people say, you are the one who always messes up. How could they say it differently? I could be wrong, but it's my perception that you seem to be the one who's always causing this to happen. See the difference? It softens it a little bit, and you don't know for sure 100%. So many times in marriage counseling, I will have the people talk to each other and say, this is the way I see it. Because that keeps them from getting at odds. It keeps them more on the same side of what's going on here. If they do not agree, don't argue. Give them time to think about it. If you're going through, just the other day I was going through our whole method explaining codependency. And about every other thing I said, well, that doesn't apply to me, that doesn't apply to me, that doesn't apply to me. Well, did I fight him over it? I said, well, you know, this is the overall theory about it. We'll just see how much it applies, but let me finish. Found out he was very much a rescuer. Head off the layer cake of miscommunication. So we're talking about there, and we'll be teaching layer caking later under the analysis part of this class. But what we're saying is, figure out how the other person is going to take it, and head off those ideas. Like if you want to say something about the meal, because maybe the bread is moldy. You know, think about how the wife is going to take it before you say, this bread is moldy. You might want to say, you know, honey, you're a great cook and I love you very much. And I realize that we haven't been around for a long time and we haven't been eating very much bread, but it seems that this bread's moldy, honey. Do you see how I headed off all those things? In confrontation, think about how the person can take it wrong and misinterpret it, and head off all of those things as you do the confrontation. With whom to do it? Who should we confront? First, you must have a relationship. Second, you must be part of the problem or part of the solution. Now, in counseling and coaching, you're part of the solution. But what am I saying? You don't go around just confronting people because you see somebody littering on the street or something. You don't just go up and say, you litter bug. Now, if you want to, you can get the license number and turn it into the police or something like that. But is it your job to confront? It's not your job to go around and tell people, you know what, you're going to hell. Now, that's the kind of confrontation that doesn't buy anything. And the kind of things that we really don't want. We're going to see here a little bit the different types of confrontation that we see in the Bible. It affects you. If you're not in a counseling relationship or a coaching relationship, then if you don't overlap with whatever they're doing doesn't affect you, you have no right to confront it. Only confront the battlefields worth dying on. If we went around trying to correct everybody else and we're critical of everybody else, guess what they're going to do? They'll be critical of us. And what's that going to do to the relationship? Not going to function, not going to work. If the client is fragile, use confrontation carefully. If one of their kids has just died, do you think that's the time to be confronting them on other issues in their life? No, if they're really emotionally hurting and so on, then you better do it very gently and only do what's absolutely necessary, and let's wait later on. You can always say 5 sessions later. You know, you're doing pretty good. You know, 5 sessions before, I noticed this and this. What do you think about that? Be respectfully careful not to step on the toes in multicultural situations. You got to think about it. You know, if you want to confront them and so on, that they've given themselves a license to just violate the law, you're going to have to be careful. If they come from a culture that has sort of a license to do that because of all the things that have happened to their culture and that kind of thing. why counselors and clients do not confront. One of the truths about me is the only B I got, getting my master's degree in psychology, was in pre-practicum. And the reason was, and you have you counseling somebody, and it was all on videotape, and they're watching this, and I'm counseling this person, and the person is struggling with low self-esteem. And we go through the entire session. The problem was this guy had something wrong with his eye. And I never confronted that. Because you think the fact he had something wrong with his eye and looked weird, and that could have had something to do with his low self-esteem. Probably. But I didn't want to make him feel bad, right? So that's one of the dangers is, why don't we confront? Because we don't want to embarrass the client. We're protecting them, but by doing that, what are we doing? We're enabling. We're protecting them for their own consequences, protecting them for the reality of life. Now, you don't just come out and say, you're about the ugliest person I've ever seen. But you might want to say something like, have you had any problems as you were growing up in your relationships with other people? By the way, what do you think about yourself? They do not like conflict. There are a lot of people that just hate confrontation because they don't know how to handle it effectively, and so they just avoid it. They'll lie, they give excuses. This is the good reason, real reason. You know, well, I'm sorry, I just don't have time to do it today. The truth is they don't want to do it. And they don't want the confrontation. Afraid the client will get mad. They don't want anyone mad at them, especially if they're a good people pleaser. How many people pleasers want to confront and want other people mad at them? No, their worth is based on them. Do not know how to effectively do it. That's why we're giving you this class in this particular course. And so that you do know how to effectively do it, so you don't make the mistake I did and have things in counseling where you don't confront something that you should have to help this person. You're too codependent. A normal characteristic of codependency is people-pleasing, because you want to get something from them, so you don't want to confront them because they might get mad at you. Do not recognize the need for it. There are a lot of people just, well, I just listen, you know. No, we have to clear up those contradictions and clear up those things so we really understand what's going on and to understand things. There are critical points in the counseling and critical points in the coaching. As an example, let's say you're coaching somebody and they say they have this tremendous passion for this particular thing, and you give them, you work out an assignment to do it, and they never do the assignment. What do you know? That the demotivators are exceeding the motivators at some particular point. Either they have a tremendous fear that's bigger than the passion, or maybe they really don't have the passion that they're telling you that they have. And you investigate that and go deeper. What do you think? Do you think Jesus confronted anybody? If you look through the Gospels, Jesus did a lot of confronting. We have all sorts of different methods of confronting that he used. Let's look at Psalm 18:26 to start with. With the pure thou wilt show thyself pure, and with the froward thou wilt show thyself froward. What's it saying? God actually treats us in the way we need the most. If we're a froward, stiff-necked, hard, prideful person, then how is God going to relate to us? Boom! Going to get our attention. But if we just want to do the will of God and we're just messing up a little bit, how's he going to deal with us? Soft and quietly. And we need to do the same thing. So we need to do confrontation in the same way that God does it. He applies it and adapts it directly to the person that we're dealing with. So some people are going to do a very soft, gentle approach. Some other people, you're going to really set them up to make sure they're able to see it and keep pressing in until you get something. Just so you don't get them on the opposite side again. Look at some other biblical examples. This is Jesus. Luke 4:23. And he said unto them, You will surely say unto me this proverb, Physician, heal thyself. Whatsoever we have heard done in Capernaum, do also here in thy country. Now, why was Jesus confronting them? Because he came home to his hometown, and they wouldn't believe him. And guess what happened? They got so mad at him, they're going to throw him off the cliff. Because they didn't want to hear what he had to say. Notice also how he does it here. He uses some biblical examples. One of the ways you can confront is tell Bible stories. One of the ways I confront many times is I'll tell stories, maintaining confidentiality so you can't figure out who the client is, about other clients that I had that maybe were worse than this or they did the same thing. Verse 24, And he said, Verily I say unto you, no prophet is accepted in his own country. But I say unto you of a truth, there were many widows were in Israel in the days of Elias, when the heaven was shut up for 3 years and 6 months, when great famine was throughout all the land. But unto none of them was Elias sent, save unto Sarepta, a city of Sidon, unto a woman who was a widow. And many lepers were in Israel in the time of Elias the prophet, and none of them were cleansed, saving Naaman the Syrian. And what's he saying? Look, God looks at the heart and looks at people, and he doesn't always, just because you happen to be a Jew, go around and doing miracles. You have to have faith for God to do miracles. So sometimes God goes clear out of the Hebrew nation. They saw all these other people that he's mentioning as total heathens, as Gentiles. And you say, and God goes to the Gentiles sometimes because the people of God don't have faith. Did they want to hear that they didn't have faith? And all they in the synagogue, when they heard these things, were filled with wrath, and they rose up and thrust him out of the city, and led him to the brow of the hill upon which the city was built, that they might cast him down headlong. By the way, that's a pretty high hill, too. It's like 500 feet or something. You know, a 45-degree slope, all rock, that the Nazareth is built upon. Here's another one, Luke 5:22. But when Jesus perceived their thoughts, he answered and said to them, notice, he's really listening, isn't he? He perceived their thoughts. What reason ye in your hearts? He notices that what he believes they're saying in their hearts is not congruent with what else they're doing. Whether it is easier to say, thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, rise up and walk. But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath the power upon earth to forgive sins, he said unto the sick of the palsy, I say unto thee, arise, take up your couch, and go into thy house. And immediately he rose up before them, took up that whereon he lay, and departed to his own house, glorifying God. So what was he saying there? You guys say I shouldn't heal on the Sabbath day. And I shouldn't be able to forgive sins because I'm not God. Well, let me prove to you that I have a right to do that and I can do that. Which one's easier? To say I can forgive your sins, or to actually do a major miracle right in front of you and take this person that can't even walk and just raise him up? So he used the power of God to confront the other person. In counseling, what would that be? Well, you don't really know what you're talking about. Well, I've counseled maybe 1,000 people or now, a lot of them are doing good. So you can use the power of God, or you can pray for them. They get healed right in front of you. There are different ways of doing it. Jesus also used natural examples. Luke 5:31. Jesus answered and said unto them, they that are whole do not need a physician, but they that are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. And he said unto them, why did the disciples of John fast often and make prayers, and likewise the disciples of Pharisees, but thine eat and drink? And he said unto them, can ye make the children of the bridegroom fast, while the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then shall they fast in those days. So we just use a natural example of just saying, look, there's a time to be happy and rejoice, and there's a time to fast. And you see it, you do it anyway in your society, and that's what's going on here. Luke 9:13. But he said unto them, Give ye them to eat. And they said, We have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fishes, except we should go and buy meat for all this people. You see how that's a confrontation? Here they are, they're saying, we got these 1,000 to 5,000 people out here, they're hungry. What are they not thinking about? What God can do. So he basically says, okay, you feed them. What does it say? You are limited and you can't possibly feed them. But God can. So he's confronting them really on their unbelief, using natural principles and logic. Luke 11:17. But he, knowing their thoughts, said unto them, Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to destruction, and a house divided against itself falleth. If Satan also be divided against him, how shall his kingdom stand? Because ye say that I cast out devils through Beelzebub. He's saying, what you're doing isn't logical. You are saying that I am casting demons out by the power of the head of the demons. If the head of the demons is using his power to cast out demons, his kingdom can't stand. He's working against himself. Your accusation makes no sense whatsoever logically. So we can use logic to confront and show them that way. Directly stating what they're doing. Now remember what we said. God confronts based on where people are. So there's a time to confront people straight to their faces. How were the Pharisees and the scribes? What were they like? They had their ideas, they were right, nobody else was right, no matter what the situation was. So they had to be confronted directly. Luke 11:44. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are as graves which appear not, and the men walk over you and are not aware of you. In those days, if you stepped in a grave, you were defiled. He's saying, inside of you, you got bad problem. Verse 47, Woe unto you, you build the sepulchres of the prophets, and your fathers killed them. And verse 52, Woe unto you, lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge, you entered not in yourselves, and them that were entering in you hindered. So you basically just took them to the face and said, look, this is what you're doing. Now in that case, I don't think he was expecting he'd ever get them on his side. Do you see what I'm saying? One supervisor I had used to call these parting shots. If he had a client, the client was about ready to leave because they couldn't get anything accomplished, he would always give them some sort of a question, some sort of a confrontation to get them to really think about what they were doing. Jesus used parables to confront people. Luke 14:7, but he put forth a parable to those who were bidden, when he marked how they chose out the chief rooms, saying unto them, But when you are bidden, go and sit down in the lowest room, and when he that biddeth thee cometh, he shall say unto thee, Friend, go up higher. Then shalt thou have worship in the presence of them that sit at meat. So he just basically said, I see what you're doing. You're not doing it the right way. This is why you ought to do it a different way. With action, when people refuse to do what is right. What is probably the biggest confrontation that Jesus did in his entire ministry? Luke 19:45, And he went into the temple and began to cast out them that were sold therein, and them that bought, saying unto them, It is written, My house is a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. The situation was that Annas, the assistant high priest, was running a scam, and he was ripping off everybody for the sacrifices and for the exchange of money. Now, if Jesus had gone to the authorities and complained, what do you think was going to happen? Nothing, because the authorities were the one that were doing it. One suggestion is they're making about $1 million a year off this scam. So he had to take them straight on, and he had to act. He just went in there and cleaned house. Jesus also used confrontation to put them in a double binding. It was a double binding. It means they can't answer the question because you got them sort of trapped. You use their discontinuity, their problem, to put them right into that situation. Luke 22. And spake unto him, saying, Tell us, by what authority dost thou these things? And who is he that gave thee this authority? They're saying, who gave you the right to go in and clear out the temple? We run the temple. And he answered and said unto them, I will also ask you one thing, and answer me. John the Baptist, was he from heaven or of men? And they reasoned among themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say, why then believed you him not? And if we say of men, all the men will stone us. For they be persuaded that John was a prophet. And they answered that they could not tell whence it was. And Jesus said to them, neither tell I you by what authority I do these things. In other words, the truth is, if I tell you I do them by heaven, you're not going to believe me. If I tell you it's my idea, then you're going to get me for clearing the temple. So you try to set me up. Luke 20:25. And he said unto them, render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things which be God's. Again, they tried to put him in a trap. They said, should we pay taxes? If he said, no, don't pay taxes, then they were going to send the Romans after him. If he said, pay taxes, then he would look bad to the Jewish people. So instead of doing that, he put them back in a double bind by the question that he just asked them. Exposing men's hearts and setting boundaries with consequences. Luke 22:21. But, behold, the hand of him that betrayeth me is with me at the table. And truly the Son of Man goeth as it was determined, but woe to that man by whom he is betrayed. He confronted Judas right in front of all the other disciples. Didn't give his name, but also set a boundary and said, if you do this, Judas, it's better you hadn't even been born. Warning with consequences. Luke 22:45. And when he rose up from prayer and was come to his disciples, he found them sleeping for sorrow. And he said unto them, why sleep ye? Rise and pray, lest you enter into temptation. So you see, Jesus had all these methods, and he was confronting all over the place in the Bible. You see that all? Sometimes he confronted with just a look. This is Luke 22:61. And the Lord turned and looked upon Peter. And Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said unto him, before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. And Peter went out and wept bitterly. So there are many different ways of confronting, but can we say from the picture of Jesus that God does expect us to confront issues? Not just to accept everything and be a chameleon and just accept everything that's going on, expect everything the client or the coach tells us or does things. So now what we're going to do is give you some practice of learning how to confront. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to give you a little vignette. Some of these come from Rose, who's our drug alcohol counselor. Some of them are from my own experience, but most of these are fairly reasonable, real situations that we have faced. And we're going to ask you then, how would you do it? We want you to write down how you would confront this particular situation, and then I'm going to tell you how I would confront the situation. And then we'll go to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And we'll just take a little break. You can turn off the DVD if you're watching this by DVD in between to give yourself enough time to do that. And we'll start with easier ones, and we'll get more difficult as we go along, okay? So here is the first one. And this is the client speaking. I'm just going to give you what the client says, and I want you first to identify what the conflict is, what is the issue here, and then I want you to write down how you would confront this particular issue. This is actually a drug alcohol one. I need to get this program done fast. I need to move out of town to Florida where my family lives. The sooner I get it over, the better. No, I haven't begun to seriously work the first step of this stupid book. And I didn't do my homework either. Okay? So what is the situation, and how are you going to confront that? Okay, if you got that complete and written down, this is something I might say. Realize you get a lot of different variables here. I'm sorry, but I'm confused. You say that you need to get this program done fast, so that you can move, but you have not even begun the first step or done your homework. Until you successfully work all 12 steps of this stupid book, you cannot complete our program. See the idea? Especially the drug alcohol clients, you have to confront pretty hard sometimes because they manipulate a lot. Okay? Here's the next one. Okay? I have not worked in my drug and alcohol workbook. It's a bunch of lies. I know the Bible, and this book does not line up with the Bible. I read the Bible every day, and this book is a bunch of bull. And here would be my suggestion. I'm glad that you are reading your Bible and that you know a lot about what it says. However, I'm confused. As I understand it, the Christian 12-step program, and especially this one with all the Bible verses in it, is supposed to be based directly in the Bible. Could you give me some specific examples of what you do not believe lines up with the Bible? I'll get more examples and try and find out, because from that I might figure out what's really going on in him and why he's so angry and what's really happening. Okay, here's the next one. So these are going to get more complicated as we go along. And it said that most of these are real cases. The SRS social worker took away my children when my older son sexually abused his sister. They are just out to get me. When they told me that my son would have to leave home or they would take my other children away, I told them I would never be disloyal to my son and willingly place him in a corrupt system like theirs. My son belongs at home with me. I can take care of my children better than any foster care parent. I just want to get a lawyer and sue them. All they want to do is take people's kids away and make us pay for the foster care so they can have a job. I know I need to cooperate to get my kids back. All I really want is to get my kids back as soon as possible. Again, evaluate that, come up with the contradictions and what you would want to confront and how you would confront it. Why I'm here? I'm sorry. I'm a little confused. On one hand, I hear you saying that you want to take on the SRS system. On the other hand, I hear that you're saying that you need to cooperate with them so you can get your kids back as soon as possible. I actually had a number of clients that had their children taken away from them that were angry with the system and tried to fight it. I've actually had only one client successfully fight the system. Which do you think will work best, and which one of these options do you think you should really take? I'm sure you can't do both. Okay, let's go on to another one. Darn it, I'm not an angry person. I went to your domestic violence group and I'm not like those other people. They're really sick. I talked to my pastor and he agrees I'm not an angry person, even though my wife says I am. She's just too sensitive. She was abused by her previous husband, you know. Anyone would be angry if they put up with all the stuff that I put up in this marriage, and now she wants out. You are all just a bunch of quacks trying to rip off people and destroy their marriages. I would be better off if I didn't even come to counseling. My marriage was just fine. And now do you see what a mess you've made of it? Now you're trying to blame it all on me by telling me I'm angry. I even went to a psychologist and he said I'm not angry. I've had enough and I'm going to show you both what anger is really like. Go ahead and evaluate that. What are the contradictions and how would you confront it? And here's sort of an idea maybe how I might approach that. You might approach it slightly differently, but it has some of the same things. I'm hearing you say that the reason your marriage is failing is because you came here to counseling. If that's true, I really want to apologize. I definitely have not knowingly done anything to try to destroy your marriage, but try to help to save it. And I'm sorry you don't see things turning out the way you want them to turn out. On one hand, you were telling me that you do not have an anger problem, and on the other hand, you are threatening to show your wife and me what it's like when you're really angry. Is it possible that you're really just distressed that your wife wants out of the marriage, and you're afraid that there's nothing that you can do to change her mind. See what I'm trying to do there? I'm trying to get him back on my side if I possibly can by apologizing if this is really true and so on, because I can't help him if I can't get him back on my side and deal with the real issues here. And here's the final one. I'm not crazy. You are the one who's crazy. I've been to numerous psychologists who have better credentials than yours, and you're the worst one yet. Remember all of the accolades, newspaper articles, and my book that I've been selling door to door that I've shown you that prove that I'm as good as anyone? I'm as good a Christian as you are. And I'm going to take that job at the university teaching karate and New Age philosophy. I know more about religion of the world than you ever could learn. My brother might think I have schizophrenia because I keep trying other things and don't seem to be able to hold a job for long. But I just have to do everything well. That's why I've even tried professional wrestling. And do you know what they called me? The BTK of professional wrestling. Because I didn't care how much I got hurt, so I would win. I won the first match until I got hurt and had to quit. Can you evaluate that? What are your evaluations? What are the contradictions? And how do you deal with that? Here's my answer on this final one that we're looking at today. I'm sorry, but just because I said that I think that you need some help sorting things out in your life, I'm not saying that you're crazy. Do you see that on one hand, you've been struggling in life so hard to become somebody, and yet you do not seem to be able to hold a job for long? That could mean that what you're doing is not working. That is why I'm simply wondering if you could use some assistance figuring out what the real problem is. What can I really do to help you? Now, from those examples, what I hope that you understood is that sometimes this confrontation thing, especially if the client starts coming after you, can be very interesting. The critical thing is how can you get it across to them, but still try to get them back on your same team if you've already lost them. And that's why confrontation is very critical, because you can lose clients, and you're going to have some of these confrontation situations like this that are very difficult to deal with, and that's why you have to really work at developing this skill. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you that you are God, and that you care for these people and you want us to help them. We ask for your wisdom in these areas of confronting other people and working on it in such a way that we can be effective. In Jesus' name, amen. And what I want you to do is to break up into individual groups and to practice. What I'd like you to do on one side is to make up a story and put contradictions in it. And then on the other side, I want you to pick up the contradictions and practice confronting in that situation. And then when you go home, I want you to look and watch other people and look for those contradictions, try to find them, and then very gently practice confronting those situations in your own life, and if possible, teach one of your kids or somebody else how to confront.